Okay, so welcome to the Planning Committee. Today's Wednesday, 5th of May, 2021. I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Councillor Matt McCabe. I'm the chair of the committee, and I will now call out the names of the other committee members who will be taking the decisions today. And I'd like to ask them to confirm that they are present. Councillors, Vic Clark.
Present.
Sue Craig.
Present.
Sally Davis.
Present.
Lucy Hodge.
Present.
Duncan Hounsell.
Present.
Sean Hughes.
Present.
Eleanor Jackson.
Present.
Hal McPhee.
Present.
And Amanda Rigby.
Present.
Also present are Simon Barnes, our legal advisor, Sarah James, the Deputy Head of Planning, and Marie Todd, the Democratic Services Officer. The planning case officers are also in attendance to present their reports and answer questions, along with the Highways Officer, Darren Cox. This meeting is being held under the Coronavirus Regulations 2020 and has the same status and validity as a meeting held at the Guildhall, although obviously those regulations expire in a day or two's time, so this will be our last virtual meeting. Possibly. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I don't believe there are any. Are there, Marie?
No apologies.
No. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. I just say that 2 of the 3 applications before us today are mine. So obviously I'll be switching my video off for those and won't be taking part in any of the debate.
Oh yes, and Councillor Jackson.
As some people may know, I'm a member of Radstock Cooperative Society, a shareholder, and fairly active in promoting the Radstock Co-op. This federation of stores, which stretches from Peasdown to Bridgewater, have absolutely no connection with this we're going to be looking at in the first application. So you might think co-op means co-op everywhere, but it doesn't, and I haven't had anything to do with this application. So it's a declaration of non-interest.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarity. Thank you, Councillor Craig. Moving on, urgent business as agreed by the chair. There is just one item of urgent business. The term of office of the current vice chair has now expired, and it is necessary to fill this position to enable decisions to be made regarding potential committee items. It is proposed that Sally Davis be appointed vice chair for an interim period until the committee can resolve the matter. Just looking for a seconder. Councillor Rigby, did you want to speak on it at all?
Happy to second, Chair.
Happy to second, jolly good. And all those in favour? Well, I should just check that Councillor Sally Davis is in favour of accepting that role for an interim.
Yeah, happy to continue, yes.
All those in favour? Well, that's pretty much everybody. Were there any abstentions or objections? No, so that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sally. Items from the public statements and questions. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to now inform you of the public speaking procedure? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the public and ward councillors not on the committee have registered to speak about individual planning applications. Speakers will be called to speak immediately after the case officer has made their presentation about the application. The order of speakers and the time allowed for speaking will be as follows. Objectors to an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Supporters of an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. If there is more than one objector or supporter of an application, they must share the 3 minutes allowed to each side. Ward councillors not on the committee who have indicated they wish to speak about an application may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. I will time the speeches and inform the chair using the chat function when the time is up. The chair will then ask speakers to immediately conclude their remarks. After making their statement, speakers will remain in the meeting so that they can observe the debate. However, they will have no further right to speak and so should mute their microphone or switch off their video. Once their item has finished, speakers will be removed from Zoom and can view the rest of the meeting on YouTube if they wish.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting, can I, they've been circulated, can I accept them as, proposer, Councillor Rigby, seconder?
I'm happy to second them.
Oh, Councillor Jackson, right, totally good. I will sign those at a date and time that I'm allowed to. And so we move on to our first item on the agenda today, the Scala, Shaftesbury Road, Oldfield Park. And I apologise having referred to it as the Scala before. That's me growing up in Brighton. I knew that as the Scala, but apparently locally it's always been known as the Scala, so I apologise. The Scala. And can I invite the case officer, Tessa Hamden, to present her report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Okay, can you see that now? Can you see the screen?
Yes, all clear.
Yep, thank you. So this application relates to the Scala, which is located on Shaftesbury Road in the Oldfield Park area of Bath. The application seeks planning permission for a mixed-use development comprising the demolition of the existing extensions and the erection of new extensions to improve the retail store at ground floor level, to provide replacement dance and community space and residential at the first floor. The proposal also includes the erection of a purpose-built student accommodation block containing 92 student bedrooms and the erection of a residential accommodation in a muse block. So this is the site location plan. The Scala, which is currently accommodates the co-op store at ground floor and dance studio at first floor, is an L-shaped building with its main entrance off Shaftesbury Road. There's a large private car park to the rear with a vehicle access into Alton Road. It's bound by Livingston Road to the north and Moorland Road to the southwest. The site's outside of the conservation area, but within the World Heritage Site. The aerial photograph shows the location, it's again, it's a bit more clearly, but not actually that clear. You can actually see the Memorial Park just to the south of the site, which is on Shaftesbury Road. This bird's eye view is looking across from Moorland Road to Arlington Road and shows the large Scala building set within the commercial and residential area. So these are the existing elevations of the Scala. As explained in the committee report, the building, which is the former cinema, is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. Significance stems from both the principal elevation, which you can see at the bottom left of the slide, and the former auditorium behind the frontage shown in the side elevations. The Scala was extended in the 1960s, which again you can see on the slides, mainly on the side elevations. I think you saw that probably at the virtual site visit as well. So these are existing floor plans of the Scala. The ground floor, which is in the greeny colour, is the retail. And at upper floor, you have in yellow, have the existing dance studio. So this is the proposed site ground floor plan. There's three main elements to this proposal: the redevelopment of the Scala, the central courtyard building, and the Muse building to the northeast corner of the site. So I'll run through each of these. So these are the elevations for the Scala building. The main facade and original part of the building will be retained, with a subservient addition added in place of a demolished extension. The extension will be constructed in rubble stone to match the flank walls of the original building. This is the proposed floor plans of the Scala. This shows the bottom of the slide shows the proposed ground floor, which is the retail units. That's the reconfigured co-op. And at the top of the slide, this is the reconfigured dance area with improved facilities. And then there's 6 residential units, so 6 flats within that element as well. So this is the courtyard building, which will be central in the site. The north elevation to the top of the slide will face into the site, with the southern elevation facing the rear of the properties at Shaftesbury Road. The building drops in height towards the southern boundary, which you can see on the side elevations. As you can see on the southern elevation, the buildings have been designed with angled windows to mitigate any overlooking issues. This building will be constructed primarily from brick with areas of bar stone as well. So this slide shows the floor plans of the courtyard building. So the building will comprise 92 student bedrooms. These will be cluster rooms with some communal space. There'll be a courtyard area at the ground floor as well. These are the elevations of the Muse buildings, which contains 10 flats. There'll be 4 flats on the ground floor and first floor and 2 within the roof. This will be from natural stone, and the top elevation that will face onto Livingstone Road, and the bottom elevation there will face into the site. So these are the floor plans, as just stated. There'll be in the roof, which is the top of this slide, there'll be 2 rooms, 2 flats in the roof, and then on the ground and first floor, there will be 4 flats in each of those. So these are the sections across the site. So the first runs through the centre of the site and is section through Livingston Road to Arlington Road. So you can see the courtyard building and the Scala building behind. The second is a section running through from Moorland Road to Arlington Road. This is the landscape plan. So there'll be trees planted within the site. There'll be vegetated boundaries and a small area to the north of the site, so facing Livingston Road, which will have some raised beds and areas for the residents. There's also a small garden area to the front of the Muse. Whilst the committee report explains the provision of purpose-built student accommodation can be supported in this location, members had asked to see a map with the HMOs plotted on. So this map shows the HMOs as black dots and the non-HMOs as red dots. So just a few photographs. Members did the virtual site visits, they would have seen the site in detail. So this is just a historic photograph of the Scala frontage in the former cinema. And this is the frontage now. So again, another picture of the frontage. This is looking down towards Shaftesbury Road and looking towards the Scala building. This is the shared access way between the rear of the properties at Shaftesbury Road and the co-op, so will be the access to the courtyard building. This is a photograph taken from the rear of the property on Shaftesbury Road, looking towards the existing Scala building. And again, another couple of photos taken from the rear of the properties at Shaftesbury Road. And on this top one, you can see quite clearly the original part of the Scala, which will be kept, and then the 1960s extension, which will be removed. These are just some photographs from the rear to the existing car park with the delivery vehicle entering the site, and then just some more photographs from the back, so that the bottom one will be looking towards the rear of the co-op, and that's where the Muse will be located. So this application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a section 106 agreement being signed, containing obligations set out within the report. Thank you.
Switch my microphone on. Thank you very much, Tessa. So questions for the officer. I just like to ask a question as there's...
Do you want the statement first, Matt?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Oh, well, I nearly got it right on my final effort. Sorry, public statements. We have 3 public speakers, then the applicant and 2 ward councillors. First on my list is Jade Tip, but I believe John Branston may be reading out her statement if she's not with us. Is John there or Jade?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
John, I can hear you. Thank you very much. And I understand you're reading out Jade and your statements. Is that correct?
That's right, yes. So thank you very much. So firstly, Jade's statement. Yeah. I have 5 main concerns about the impact of the proposed development on our property and quality of life. Number 1, the height of the courtyard building will totally overwhelm our property and make our main living space very claustrophobic. Number 2, the daylight study only notes a moderate impact on our property, but has failed to establish the habitable status of affected rooms, and notes that no external amenity space has been identified at this property, warranting an analysis. So this key report takes no account of the layout of our home, nor does it consider our garden, where we spend a great deal of time. Number 3, the bedrooms for our 2 young daughters and our main living space will be directly overlooked by the development. This will be a huge invasion of our privacy that has been lightly dismissed in the report. Number 4, the case officer considers the noise from the development to be acceptable. Noise levels from existing student properties in the area are already a real and ongoing issue. Adding another nearly 100 students into this small space is going to make a bad situation worse. And number 5, the developer is proposing an unsafe arrangement whereby pedestrians and cyclists will be forced to share the vehicular access lane to the side of houses in Shaftesbury Road. This lane is frequently used by residents and by 2 local multi-HMO landlords in large vans to access their respective storage units behind houses in the row. Opening up this access also creates a new security risk to the rear of our property. Electric gates promised by the developer to secure the rear of our property have not made it into the plans. And now, myself, on behalf of the wider community, I would urge you to bear in mind the strong existing identifying character and materials of Oldfield Park's built environment, the area's well-known issues with overrepresentation of the student demographic, the existing pressures on parking locally, the failed, unenforceable no-car policies at other PBSA sites, which have resulted in overspill parking, and the context, aims, and imperatives of the building heights strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And your statement?
That was both.
Oh, that was both. Thank you very much. Very good, very concise and on time. Can I ask Alexandra Best from, are you there? Oh, thank you. Yes, from Park Preservation Trust. Off you go.
Lovely. The Trust is supportive in principle of mixed-use development on this site, and we welcomed the revisions to the development design. However, the proposed height and scale of the 4-storey central courtyard building remains out of character with the established roofline of the Oldfield Park character area and the setting of the conservation area. The site is visible in mid-range elevated townscape views, and the courtyard building would have an overbearing impact on its 2-storey residential context. Character assets of the area include the homogenised common scale and density of the streetscape, in which the Scala building is a landmark feature. The scale and office-like design of the courtyard building would challenge the Scala's architectural prominence and detract from its landmark character. We are opposed in principle to the provision of speculative PBSA in a declining market and an area of over 25% HMO concentration, and maintain student accommodation should only be considered where delivered in conjunction with an education provider, such as Norland College. The proposed development, by virtue of height and scale, would fail to reinforce local distinctiveness and would harm the visual amenity value of the townscape, and would result in a built form that would fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. We therefore recommend that the application is refused.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Yestin Lewis, are you there? Yes, for the applicant. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Yestin Lewis, and I'm a local Bath resident and the Chief Executive of Rengen Developments. Rengen is proud of our track record in the region, but particularly within Bath, where we are a major investor and employer, and also the principal sponsor of Bath University Sport. Key projects that Rengen has successfully delivered within Bath that share a number of similar properties to our proposals for the Scala site before you today include the regeneration of Widcombe Social Club, 1 to 3 James Street West, comprising the regeneration of the former Bath Labour Exchange, and Bath Sea Cadets, where Rengen provided a modernised Sea Cadets training facility. I turn now to my key points in support of our redevelopment proposals for the Scala site. 1, the retention of Co-op as the anchor tenant within Oakfield Park. First and foremost, we have worked collaboratively alongside Co-op over a 3-year period in order to provide a mixed-use development with a new Co-op retail store format at its core. The retail servicing strategy has been informed by Co-op Logistics and has been deemed acceptable to Baines Highways officers. 2, dance centre. We've worked closely with the previous tenant, Freedom Dance, throughout the application period. A fully refurbished and modernised dance centre is a key part of our redevelopment proposals, and we remain in discussions with a potential tenant. 3, conservation feedback. We've endeavoured to positively address conservation comments on our proposals in relation to the Scala extension and the North Mews in particular. 4, car parking and servicing strategy. Our professional team has worked hard to strike a balance and keep an adequate level of parking on site for local shoppers. This is a private car park, however 30 spaces are allocated for Co-op local use. A minimum of 3 electric vehicle charging points will be provided on site, and we've designed in passive provision for the connection of electric charging points. It is the intention that a car club will be provided on site, and in addition, we are also in dialogue with an electric scooter company regarding a station at the site for public benefit. 5, affordable housing. Our proposals offer a fully policy compliant provision of affordable housing, and we have signalled our willingness to work with Baines housing officers to agree the most suitable affordable housing tenure as part of the Section 106. 6, Nolan College. Finally, members may note that Nolan College were named on the original application document submitted in February 2020. Since then, and as a direct result of the global coronavirus pandemic, Nolan are unfortunately not currently in a position to commit to a lease on the student cluster accommodation proposed in the courtyard block. We plan to continue to engage with Nolan College, and we very much hope that they will be in a position to offer the student accommodation to their first year students on completion. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Can I ask a neighbour ward member, Councillor Sean Stevenson McGall, to speak, please? You might need to unmute.
Sorry, I thought I pressed the button then. Apologies. Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, can I thank you and the Vice Chair for allowing this discussion to come to committee. The scheme is controversial in the area for a number of reasons. And even though Rengen have engaged with the local ward members for the last 3 years and the community, and they have made many changes to their original plans, both privately and publicly in terms of what has been submitted, I do think there are still some concerns with this application. I'll start with the positive things. So I do welcome the retention of the Co-op store. Their business model has changed and they need a smaller premises, but that is what they need, and therefore they need to ensure that the site is put to good use. The inclusion for housing for long-term residents with an aspect of affordable provision is to be welcomed, and the retention of the community space, again, is to be welcomed. However, Oakfield Park is saturated with HMOs, as the case officer showed you in the plan, and building further PBSA in this area, I believe, is contrary to policy C10 in terms of a housing mix, CP10 rather. Any proposed restrictions on parking for the student tenants are obviously not enforceable. You speak to any of the councillors and residents in the city where we have PBSA around the city, and they can give you umpteen examples of where this totally fails and is unenforceable. The core strategy and the placemaking plan policies D2, D3, D5, D6 on design and massing materials, I do not believe are adhered to sufficiently in this application. There is additional pressure on already overloaded infrastructure such as bus services and parking within the area, and therefore it's not sustainable in this context. The courtyard building is still too high, even though there have been changes, and I believe it exceeds the Bath Building Height Strategy guidelines for the hill slope zone. This will have an impact on the World Heritage Site sitting and the views across the city. So overall, there are some benefits of this, and we need to retain the co-op, but I think there are some very big concerns with it, no least the 96 student accommodation. I would be much happier if there was a head lease with Norland Nannies, because they don't have any accommodation currently, and their students in their first year go straight into HMOs. And for me, if there was that head lease, this would be a better application than it is. But we are where we are today in terms of their application. So on that mind, I would ask you to think about those concerns when you make your decision on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sean. And finally, the ward member, Councillor June Player.
Okay. Thank you. Although an image has now been shown, I would still like to ask that before a decision on this application is made, that the actual numbers of both the HMOs in this area plus the actual number of students in them is known to you, so you can make a far more informed decision about the inclusion of the purpose-built student block here. This site and this application can actually be seen as a microcosm of the housing mix and the number of students compared to non-students that already exists throughout virtually all of Westmoreland Ward in which the Scala is. Student accommodation is not what we need here, residential is. 92 student beds are being proposed compared to 15 one-bed and a 1-2-bed residential unit. The location of at least 10 of them will be like living on a traffic roundabout, as 3 sides of it will have vehicles passing by. Even if you accept there will be 2 adults in each of the flats, which I doubt will be the case, then the non-student numbers will only be 34. Compare that with the 92 student ones. This imbalance of students with non-students is mirrored throughout virtually all the streets in Westmoreland Ward. It totally highlights what can be seen as the housing imbalance that already exists between HMOs and non-HMOs. This is why an Article 4 was brought in, to halt the harm all the HMOs were doing and to encourage an appropriate housing mix balance and help bring back community feel and spirit. The number of students being proposed far exceeds the number of non-student ones, which is exactly the situation with all the adjacent streets and then the ones that are adjacent to them and so on. Unless you have or do live here or visit regularly, you really cannot get the true feeling and picture of this area. So here are just a few facts as time is limited. I have used the latest figures from the Baines HMO register to show the HMO numbers and their occupancy numbers. Plus, I should be giving generous estimates for the number of adult occupants in the remaining non-HMOs based on 2 adults in each of them, even though a lot of them only have 1 in them. Arlington Road has 31 properties, 11 are HMOs, a 35%. Total number of students, 60. Generous estimate in remaining 20 is 40. Livingston Road has 42 properties, 21 are HMOs, so 50% of it. Total number of students is 95. Estimate remaining in the 21 is 42. Shaftesbury Road has 30 properties, 12 are HMOs, so 40% of them. Total student numbers, 55. Estimate in the remaining 18, 36. Third Avenue has 92 properties, 39 are HMOs, a 42%. Total number of students, 168. Generous estimate numbers on the remaining 53, 106. Stanley Road West has 34 properties, 23 are HMOs, 67% of it. Total number of students, 121. Estimate numbers in remaining 11 is 22. Triangle North has 29 properties, 26 are HMOs, an 86%. Total number of students, 119. Estimate numbers in the remaining 3 is 9. Herbert Road has 68 properties, 35 are HMOs, a 51%. Total number of students, 150. Estimate numbers in remaining 33 is 66. And so it goes on and on and on like this in this ward. there are now to be 92 students living in the student block with no parking provision. Surely there should be at least one disabled space for student use. The no cars policy is only for the actual students, yet it does not apply to any of their visitors. Where are they expected to go, other than maybe in the spaces for the shoppers or filling up on-street parking spaces, of which there's already a huge shortage in this area? The residential amenities of neighbours will most definitely be harmed. I still have health and safety concerns about the mix of pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles using the route between the Shaftesbury Road entrance and the Scala and the rank of houses of 5, whose parking spaces can only be accessed via that route. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. And now we move on to questions to the officers. I'd like to thank all our public speakers. Could I just start by asking officers just to give us some guidance on this thing of the density of students and HMOs in the area and what policy says about a PBSA in this place?
Yeah, of course, thank you. The policy position is quite clear on where PBSA is acceptable. So the policy explains that it's not acceptable in the central area or enterprise areas. So this site is outside of those designations. So it is acceptable in principle. In terms of the density of the HMO, there's obviously the policy which you deal with quite often at committee with regards to change of use of residential dwellings to HMOs. And that's when you'd be looking at whether it's in a saturated area. And that's the map that I showed you earlier, but that policy doesn't apply in this case. So you need to look at policy CP5, which talks about whether PBSA is acceptable or not in this area. So my view as a politician is quite clear that student accommodation can be supported in this area. There's also the policy H10, which talks about housing mix. That looks really at what you're providing within the site, whether that's an acceptable mix for the actual development. And I think it's important to note, I know obviously members have raised some concerns previously with regards to this, that the recent appeal at the Locksbrook Plum Centre, the inspector at that time stated that the student developments was an appropriate mix because it provided studios and clustered, so that was an appropriate mix at that time. So my view is that it's an acceptable development of student accommodation in this site.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Oh, sorry. I thought there were people before me, but
oh, sorry. You're right. So I'm just going back. Not doing very well today. Councillor Jackson to start.
Right. I've got several areas of concern, but I thought perhaps the officers could help on 2 of them. I wondered if the highways officer could explain about a swept path and the access for the delivery vehicles to this site, which apparently is going to involve reversing. We saw in one of the slides the actual size of these co-op vehicles, and we also saw how narrow the entrance was. And I wondered if the highways officer would like to expound on that a bit, given that this is a site that is used by people going across it. There are masses of school children, I'm informed, who use the pavements around the building. I wondered if the danger to children have been sufficiently assessed. And also I wondered if you could explain, because some of us are not that familiar with this area, though we do know it, what the impact is on changing the direction of the one-way street, Arlington Road, isn't it? And the measures that have been taken in Moorland Road to narrow the road. So I'd be very grateful for a comment on these questions of access for vehicles. And the other immediate area of concern is the design. I wondered if we could have another look at the student block, or a bit closer look, because I'm not satisfied that the design reflects the surrounding residential properties, which are, as one of the speakers said, only 2-storey, and I think this is going to be 4-storey, is it not? And might be a more appropriate design on the Lower Bristol Road, or somewhere where there is more of a concentration of student residences. So
yeah. Should I quickly deal with the design
issue,
and then Darren, I'll pass you to the highways issue? So if I just quickly share the screen again. So this is the student block here. So it's 3 stories with a room and a roof. So we described as 3 or 4, but it's 3 with a room and the roof. As you can see, the building drops to 3 stories without a roof as it approaches towards Shaftesbury Road. So my view is that reduces the impact of the development. Yes, it will be visible from some views outside of the site, as recognised by some of the speakers and in my committee report. But my conclusion is actually that the building is more successfully articulated now than the existing extension, so that helps break up the massive building. The building is more of a contemporary design than the surrounding buildings, but I think because it's within the site, I think there's more room for a more kind of contemporary approach to the design. It will still take some cues from the surrounding buildings, the tone of the brick and the elements of the bath, stone, etc. And the form of the roof, I think, will still tie it in with the main building. Would you like to see any more or anything else on that slide, Councillor Jackson?
Anna, are you still there? I think quite a few people having technical difficulties this morning.
Okay.
Just on that, is that so are you? The top right there, that's the north facing view.
That's correct, yeah. So that will face kind of into the site.
Won't that be at the end that's overlooking the neighbours?
The bottom side, the bottom of the plan here, the elevations, that will be the one that will overlook the neighbours on Shaftesbury Road.
Huh. Have you got any detail of that? Because there's 5 gardens that overlooks, isn't there?
There, I think there are 5, yes, yeah.
Have you got any further detail on that? I can see there's sort of some angled.
You can probably see it clearer on the floor plans here. So you can see the windows to the south, which are angled. So they'll only have windows in the bits kind of facing towards the Scala, so facing away from the neighbours, which in my view reduces the level of overlooking to the neighbours. There's also, I think, a distance of about 25 metres between those windows and the rear elevation of Shaftesbury Road, which is deemed to be in generally an acceptable kind of distance between back to back of windows.
And what's the distance between the student building and the back fences of the gardens?
Don't know the actual distance. I can show you on a.
And was there any discussion of any kind of screening? But I suppose with a 4-storey building, it's very hard to put any screening in.
Yeah, there is some kind of boundary treatment on the ground floor, but clearly that will only really work for the ground floor. It won't help for the upper floors if you've got concerns there. But as I said, the windows are angled, so they look towards the Scala building, or these buildings, rather than directly into the gardens.
Have we got Eleanor back? No. Okay. She asked the question about the swept path route. Darren, did you want to? Do you have an image, or does Tessa have an image?
I think I probably do have an image of the swept path. I can get one. It's not a matter of presentation, but would you like me to find one?
Yes, and that was that specifically about the route of the lorries through the site?
Darren did send
yes,
me one
that's what I'm concerned about, if that can be indicated.
Thank you.
It is relating to the delivery lorries to the site, Chair, yes.
And sort of related to that is the question of the noise it will make. I know that in some places these co-op delivery vehicles come at about 7 a.m. in the morning.
There is a condition with regards to deliveries and operation hours
And
recommended.
if you're going to have a vehicle makes a squeaking noise, doesn't it?
Yeah, there is a recommended condition to control that. Darren, do you want to talk through these? And I'll just go through
Of course.
this, or-
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on in response to your the points you raised, Councillor Jackson. We met with the applicant's transport consultant, I think, on 2 separate occasions on site, and they came forward with 3 option deliveries to the site. One was a loading on Arlington Road, just northwest of the existing access. One was on Shaftesbury Road, and one of them was to contain loading within the site. We, as the Highway Authority, didn't support a new loading bay on the public highway. Both were to be prejudicial to highway safety when I talked through the locations with colleagues, and our preference was always for loading activities to be undertaken wholly within the site boundary. Following that, the applicant's transport consultant confirmed that the existing lorries which service the current co-op store, which are 10-metre long rigid vehicles, will still service the replacement co-op, and they provided what was known as swept path analysis, which allows a selected vehicle to be driven along the public highway and into the site, and the result is 2 lines, one which shows the body of the vehicle, one which shows the overhang. So we have got swept path analysis which demonstrates that the 10-metre rigid vehicle can travel southeast on Arlington Road, turning right into the site. They then drive into the site as I believe they do now. And sorry, I'm just scrolling down my screen. That when they arrive at the loading bay, which is protected by bollards, so will only be in use when a delivery vehicle arrives into the loading bay, and we have a written commitment from the applicant that when this particular reversing manoeuvre occurs, there will be banksmen to ensure the safety of pedestrians and cyclists who are also within the area. From there, the vehicle can unload before turning right out of the loading bay through the car park and back up to Arlington Road, where we think that the easiest way for the vehicle to go then is to turn left and then back out on to Livingston Road and Broome Hayes. As part of that, the one-way section of Arlington Road to the northwest of access will need to become 2-way, but that does mean that delivery vehicles will no longer need to turn right along the residential roads, and that they will be able to get out of the area on roads that are more appropriate for them to use. The 2-way section of Arlington Road will need to be subject to a traffic regulation order, which will be advertised, and people will be able to have their say on. And we've got a written commitment from the applicant to fund that traffic regulation order. I'm not don't want me to outline for you.
Councillor Jackson, does that cover some of your issues?
Oh yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
Though I think the wider context is also quite important.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
So I was a few questions, but I was hoping to see a few more where maths, development of the site and the design, maths and materials are so important. I would have liked to see usually a development of the site, we'll see quite a lot of images of the proposed buildings in the context, especially with they just not made available by the applicant.
But there were some
heights
visuals that the proposal changed slightly over time, and I decided to include them, unfortunately.
Okay, the one slide that we had of the building that is the large courtyard block that you talked about, brick, is that going to be red brick, or have you confirmed the materials for that?
It will be kind of a buff brick, really, to match the kind of the tone of the glass stone. There is a condition on there which would obviously secure the final materials through a sample panel.
The other two questions I had was about the building height strategy. So could you just outline what the building height strategy is for this area? And I understand it's still exceeded, and by how much it's exceeded. And the other point is about the tree planting I wanted to raise. So the arboriculturists felt didn't support the application because of lack of tree planting. I just wondered, had there been much discussion again about getting a bit more green landscaping in, or was that not possible?
Yeah, the building height strategy looks really at the impacts upon the World Heritage Site rather than, I guess, the immediate setting. So our landscape officer was happy with the impacts upon the World Heritage Site and the height of it. So it's more about the impacts upon the immediate area, which there have obviously been concerns raised about. So there is that judgment of whether that height is acceptable or not on those grounds. In terms of, sorry.
Is it height to meterage, or is it? And
it's kind of talks about stories and in different kind of settings. I think the reference that was made by the kind of third parties reference this is, I think, the hillside slope. So that kind of really talks about the areas which are kind of quite visible from wider areas, and this one isn't. So it's a kind of a document that is guidance, but it's not something that's kind of set in stone. So our landscape officers obviously looked at this, and the primary purpose of that document is for the setting of the World Heritage Site. So he was kind of happy with the views kind of looking down, but it was just the views from the more immediate surrounding streets where the height was considered to be more of a concern, and where I've taken that balanced judgment on it. In terms of the tree planting, we've discussed that quite heavily with the applicants during the process, and they have included more trees as we've kind of gone through the process. There's always that balance to be struck between removing car parking spaces and introducing more green infrastructure. So there were a couple of parking spaces removed and trees put in space to kind of break up those long kind of rows of parking spaces. But obviously putting more in would obviously create more problems with regards to parking. So it's, again, getting that right balance between providing parking and providing the green infrastructure, and looking at what's there at the moment in terms of it being hard standing and kind of having a benefit in kind of comparison to what's there.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you.
Sorry for the wait.
No, it's no problem. Okay, so I have a couple of questions. I mean, this issue over density, not just student density, but population density. Are we saying that we don't actually have a policy on that? Because obviously the properties here were never designed for this level of population density. What would be traditional family homes are largely 4, 5 or 6 beds HMOs now. So is that not a concern when we're...
Yeah, I mean, that is a concern. We look at that under a different policy. So this application is not assessing an HMO, it's assessing purpose-built student accommodation. So they're looked at quite differently. So when you're looking at an HMO, a change of use of a residential family home to an HMO, you would look at, well, is the loss of that family housing acceptable? And also, does that house have the ability to accommodate X number of residents? So you'd look at it, is the density acceptable there? And are there too many HMOs in that street in the wider area? But when you're looking at whether purpose-built student accommodation is acceptable, we have to assess it against policy CP5, which, as explained, looks at, is it in the central area? Is it in the enterprise area? And if not on a Winfield site such as this, it isn't contrary to policy.
Okay. And on the issue of parking, so we've established that, I mean, although it's only by one space, this isn't policy compliant at the moment on parking. Do you think that perhaps in an area where there's such a serious parking issue that our parking policy should be set as a minimum?
Policy is set as a minimum, and then the accessibility questionnaire allows that flexibility. So accessibility questionnaire looks at things such as how close is it to the local shops, to doctors, to the train station. So that's given the applicant a discount, which is applicable. And then, as you referenced, yeah, it's one space short from that. The parking strategy does say the final number is to be determined by the local planning authority. So there is that scope to have that flexibility further. It is a question, and I can let Darren come on this, whether, you know, one less parking space would really be justifiable as a refusal. Is that going to result in harm to highway safety? We have to demonstrate there is harm to the highway safety. So that's a judgment you would need to make. I don't know if Darren wants to add anything onto that in terms of parking.
No, just to sort of reaffirm what you said, Tessa, the 16 flats need a minimum of 20 spaces, including provision for visitor parking. The accessibility assessment, which was submitted in support of the application, scored 43, which I checked, and I agree with that score. Allows us to apply a discount of up to 25% to the number of spaces that are required. That takes the number of spaces that the applicant is required to provide down to 15, and they are proposing 14. So we know there is a shortfall of one space. However, we don't feel that we can demonstrate that there will be harm as required by paragraph 109 of the MPPF. So on balance, we are satisfied that the 14 spaces are appropriate in this location and as part of this application.
So where in the calculation do you take into account the fact that the area doesn't have any parking permits, and so currently there's a serious problem with on-street parking? Where in your calculation do you make an allowance for the serious parking issues that already exist in the area?
Unfortunately, the accessibility assessment that we are using at the moment doesn't take that into account. The only account it takes of residence parking is the application site within a parking zone, yes or no. Unfortunately, that's the only weight that our existing accessibility assessment gives to permit parking. This may change with the local plan review, partial local plan update that we're currently going through, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. And with this policy that this condition that the students are not permitted to bring any vehicles, how is that enforceable and by who? And is it actually being enforced elsewhere in the city?
The applicant would be required to do a detailed strategy to explain how it would be enforced. It's been kind of I guess something that's been included for a number of years on purpose-built student accommodation blocks. And I think, to be honest, we have learned as time's progressed about how to ensure it is done better. What would happen would be the students would have it in their leases when they signed up to the purpose-built student accommodation that they couldn't bring a car within a set distance to the block. And it would be in their welcome packs. They'd have it at their open meetings, etc. So it'd be kind of drummed into them. And then they would have to register their car details that they had at home with the management company, etc. And then the local residents would be provided with the number of if they could report it. So there'd be a number of measures in, but the primary responsibility would be on the operators. And then our enforcement team would be able to pick up any issues as well.
Doesn't sound like a feasible policy to me, but okay. And just one final question. So with the fact that they now do not have the supports of Norland College, is there any viability reports to justify the existence of this student accommodation?
There doesn't need to be any viability reports if the application is compliant with the policy, which it is, so they don't need to provide that information.
I appreciate they don't need to, but they haven't provided one.
They haven't, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Craig.
My questions have both been asked already, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPhee.
I must say that I'm still support Councillor Hodge I would like to know how much overlooking for the first speaker. She said there was a direct overlooking into the garden. Now, I remember when we were doing the hospital, we had nice pictures from those houses and were able to see, and there was also a sunlight analysis. Can you provide any data for me about how much overlooking that first speaker is going to suffer?
Well, I've previously shown the slide which had the distances between the two, which is about 25 metres, and shown the floor plans which had the angled windows. So that will show where the windows will be looking out of. I don't have any images that we had for the hospital, for example, which look directly from there. Sorry, Councillor McPhee, spoke over you.
Interfering with light, you know, because it's too high.
Yeah, in terms of the other information we have, there is a daylight sunlight assessment which was submitted to the application. So that looks at a number of factors such as vertical sky analysis, sunlight to the rooms, and I think it looks at 4 different issues, measures of light falling on the windows. So it's looked at all those measures and it's analysed, I think, about 7, I think it's in my report, about 70 properties, and fully assessed the impact on all those neighbours in terms of, yeah, loss of light, overshadowing, etc. And my conclusion is, yeah, there will be a change in how the residents experience the site, but this isn't significant harm. And our policy references, you know, that there shouldn't be significant harm. So my conclusion is I still have acceptable living conditions, although, you know, these may change slightly, but it is overall on balance acceptable.
And I know that you said you're happy with the PBSA camp. Didn't quite understand how the windfall analysis doesn't seem to indicate a great deal of planning, does it? You know, if something comes up, it seems as though we can give it, even though we're beginning to not want any more PBSA. What's the idea behind that windfall?
Well, I think windfall sites are unallocated sites, so you can never plan for every site to come forward in the planned period. But as I said, you know, the areas that, when the placemaking plan was adopted, that were considered to be at threat from student accommodation within the central area and the enterprise area. So they're the areas that the policy resists student accommodation, because they were the areas where it was considered to compromise other objectives. But if a windfall site comes forward, purpose-built student accommodation doesn't compromise any objectives of the local plan or development plan, because it's not allocated for any other use. So therefore, windfall sites are considered to be acceptable locations for PBSA.
And just to go back, because Councillor Player did a lot of analysis there, and it was interesting. I wrote as much as I could down, and it seems like if we are saturated with HMOs, the way she was talking, there were about 4 times as many students as there were HMOs. I mean, do you not respond to the proposition that she makes that we do have enough students in that area at the moment?
The policy doesn't require us to undertake that test. So the policy just simply looks at, is the student accommodation acceptable in this location? And it is. In terms of need, demand for student accommodation, again, I've just referenced the appeal at the Plum Centre, and again, the Hartwell's appeal recently, where the inspector said there is demand for student accommodation. They did give that significant weight in the determination of the application. So I think in terms of just looking purely at the principle of student accommodation on this site, you know, officers are supportive of it, and we would urge members also to be supportive of the principle of accommodation, student accommodation.
He's in a minority of one, I think, in thinking that we need more PBSAs. But anyway, I'm expressing an opinion there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. Councillor Davis.
Tess has just actually answered my question. I was going to understand the point made by Councillor Sean Stevenson McGall about an agreed partner would be better for the PBSA. I was going to ask how the recent appeal decisions might affect this with no identified partner here linked to the need of accommodation, but you've just answered the very question for me, Des.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jackson, you have another problem?
Well, yes, I've been looking through the terms and conditions, well, the general development conditions, which the officer has set out in her report. And I can't see anything about delivery times to the store when it's functioning. There is a plan for the construction of the site, which obviously will take some time, and appropriate measures there for the management of delivery of building materials. But I was talking about the delivery of milk, and they use these whopping great big wagons, even if it's a small store. So I would want to see a condition written in about the times of delivery to that store. And of course, I'd also hope they would be enforced. So that's one question. We need that condition in, if you don't mind. And secondly, on page 55, provision must be made on site for rainwater harvesting and local food grown in line with policies of the placemaking plan. The scheme benefits from communal gardens area, which will ensure these policies are complied with. I would like to know about this communal garden area, because I cannot for the life of me see how you could enforce the growing of vegetables, which is a worthy aim, but I'm not at all sure. Could the officer perhaps indicate where this vegetable patch is going to be on site? I mean, we know there's going to be a contribution to the Monksdale allotments, which is, I'm very pleased about, but how do we get them to grow vegetables on site?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it'd be very difficult to control that and enforce that in the long term. It's just ensuring there is space to allow for the opportunities to do that. So there is space. It's the same with any new housing development. You just make sure there was a kind of garden, balcony areas, etc. But you could never ensure that they grew their vegetables going forward. But it's just ensuring there is the opportunity to do that. So we're happy that policy is complied with. In terms of the deliveries, condition 14 deals with deliveries of the retail unit. Just for your information, is on there.
Can you just recap that? Because there's a store there at the moment. They're intending to put a temporary store there somehow.
There'll be a temporary store. There's a condition to ensure there's a temporary store during the construction period. And then the new store will take over. So what can you do in terms of that conditioning that changes what they're doing currently for the store that's there? The current store, I'm not 100% sure of the operation hours of the current store. The proposed condition states that they shouldn't enter the site before the hours of 7 o'clock or after 10 o'clock, Monday to Saturday or bank holidays. The reason for including it now, and there wasn't one before, is obviously you've got a lot more accommodation within the site, so the site's more intense. You've got the student accommodation right next to the retail deliveries, and obviously the space is really quite small there, so that's why we've included it at this stage.
Okay. Sarah, did you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to some of the debate, just to make some clarifications about a couple of the areas discussed. So in particular, I wanted to come back in regards to the need for the student accommodation. Obviously, Councillor Player put forward lots of information, but as the case officer has already explained, this application complies with your adopted planning policies, and decisions have to be made in accordance with the development plan unless there are very significant and demonstrable evidence-based material considerations to demonstrate that that isn't the case, and that policy should be not adhered to, and there's nothing before you that would enable you to set that policy aside with regards to the HMO need, and if you were to do so, then I think you would be at very significant risk if you went to appeal. The policy is quite clear, and going forwards, the evolving situation will be looked at by the local plans team, and more evidence will be gathered, and obviously policies change, but at the moment the policy you have is the one that you should be applying with regard to the need for the student accommodation. And the other thing I just wanted to respond to really was the highway safety and the parking issues. As the transport officer has already explained, whilst there may be a very, very, very minor shortfall in the context of this development in respect of a shortfall of parking space, in order for that to be a reason for refusal, it would have to have a very severe impact on highway safety. And it's very clear in the NPPF that in order to refuse it on highway grounds, there would have to be a severe impact. Again, that, you know, the technical evidence doesn't support that. The highway officer doesn't support that, and it would be a very difficult thing to defend on appeal. Clearly, there's other aspects of the development that you've discussed relating to the impact on residents, etc., amenity, appearance. Those are more subjective, but with regard to those two particular points, the position is quite clear, and I think I just need to really reiterate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Tessa, could we just have a quick look at the slide, the one that showed there was one that gave us a sort of an image of what the flats are going to look like. Is it possible to see that again?
See the student accommodation flats or the Muse flats?
The actual residential.
These ones here. These are the residential within the Muse block.
Oh, what were the ones in the slides further down? So there, that's it. So the glass, are they glass fronted buildings?
This is the sections through the site. So that's just the sections.
But the are those, is that indicating glass, the blue?
No. It's just a section through. So it's just kind of on this bit here, you can just see it's kind of cut through.
I see.
Just like a section through. So it would all be kind of masonry, brick or stone.
Oh, that's fine. Sorry, as it flicked fast earlier in the presentation, it just looks like it had a glass in look about it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's not that clear. Yeah.
Okay, and we don't actually have any. That's the only detail we've got there is the actual. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, can I just ask again? Bath Preservation Trust asked about the architectural prominence of the Scala frontage. What was your consideration on that again? Does it diminish the prominence of this?
No, my conclusion. Sorry, I've just come back. My conclusion is that there isn't an impact upon the non-designated heritage asset, which is the Scala building, the primary frontage, and the walls behind.
Okay, we've not got any further questions. We'll move to debate then. So I've got Councillor Hodge.
So I know we've explored the policy CP10 and CP5, and I think we're all very frustrated that these sit side by side and there is not really much more we can do about the fact that these problems of HMO and PBSA can't be taken together. But for me, I feel with this application, it's a classic, for me, it just feels like overdevelopment of the site, for which there are policies about, and overloading the existing infrastructure in terms of parking and bus services, and as a consequence of overdevelopment of the sites having impacts on residential amenity of neighbours. And I have a real problem with the design that has come forward, the design and mass. This area of Moorland Road does have its own particular distinctive character, rows and rows of terraced houses of a particular period, early Victorian, I think, and I feel what's come forward isn't reflective of that character, and it's the Muse houses look like a kind of take on Georgian Muse houses, and the large doesn't sit well either, and I feel none of it enhances the 1960s original Scala buildings. We've got the Scala building and the Victorian terraces, and something put in between them that doesn't complement either, in my opinion. So those are the planning points that I'm really not happy about.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I guess I'm in something of a quandary here, because it seems to me that we've got layman's common sense versus the existing policy. I have a lot of sympathy with the comments of the residents, and in particular comments that Councillor June Player made. And so if I'm sitting here just looking at it from I use the term common sense, but shall we say just from an everyday point of view, I would be against this development on the grounds that people have discussed car parking, overdevelopment, student accommodation. But as the Deputy Planning Officer is reminding us, we should be looking at policy, not just what Vic Clark happens to think as an individual. So I actually find myself between the devil and the deep blue sea, because I can see no reason on the basis of sitting on the planning committee from a policy point of view that I could vote against this. So I'm just saying, for this, of all the ones that's come before us, and we do have one or two which occasionally are on a knife edge, this one I find I'm particularly uncomfortable with.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything that Councillor Lucy Hodge said. I went over there on Monday actually and took a walk around, because it's not an area that I'm overly familiar with in Bath. And I was surprised that how enclosed and how dense the area is. I don't think the virtual site visit that we had really gave that didn't fully explain how enclosed this area is, and to have a 4-story building in the centre of it would just dominate everything. It's and the car park area felt like it's the only open space left in that part of the town. So I just think that just to lose the only bit of open space left in that part of Bath would be awful. So no, I have a problem with the scale of this, particularly the student accommodation. Thank
Councillor Hounsell.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the comments made by Councillor Clark. Really, this is a dilemma which he expressed well. Like everyone else, I've heard and understood all the reservations that have been expressed about this application, but we have to apply the planning policies as they are written now, and not what we would like them to be. And it does seem to me, listening to all the presentations, that this application is largely policy compliant, or near enough to be acceptable in planning terms. And I do worry that if we refuse and the applicant goes to appeal, we would lose the appeal. So I will wait to hear a little bit more of the discussion before deciding. But at the moment, I think I would just feel I would need to support this application, but with reservations. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. This is a bit of a red letter day for me, because I'm going to say words I don't think I've said on planning committee before. I agree entirely with Councillor Clark. It is a very, very finely balanced decision in my mind. And were we to have been further along in our process of changing some of the policies we've got, I think the balance may have tipped one way rather than the other. But again, and I have said this before, I'm agreeing with Councillor Hounsell. It is so difficult. It is so difficult because no one wants to put us in a position where we lose money on an appeal. But on the other hand, I agree with Councillor Hodge about the overbearing nature and the overdevelopment of the site. So I guess I haven't made my mind up yet. I guess what will make my mind up in the end is whether or not ignoring the things that I would like to be able to take into account, but we haven't got the policies to take them into account, ignoring those entirely, whether or not the design, the look, the feel, and the size and scale of the development is something that I feel counterbalances its good points, because there are some good points in it. And that's how I will make my decision, but I don't quite know what my decision is going to be yet.
Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. This is really, really hard. Yeah, I'm echo everything that's been said so far. I wonder, Tessa, could you just talk us a little bit through the housing mix bit of policy and why you feel that that is okay? Sorry, I should have probably asked you that in the questions thing, but I just thought of it now.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. The policy of housing mix looks at what's being provided on site, and is that kind of, does that complement, I guess, the surrounding uses, etc. So what I've looked at is providing a mixture of student accommodation and a mix of residential, and that is a kind of an acceptable housing mix for that development of that type. I think I referenced before when we were speaking about it, the recent appeal at the Plum Centre, which was actually refused on the housing mix and there being too much student accommodation in the location. And the inspector dismissed that argument and said, well, you're providing two types of student accommodation, that's acceptable in the housing mix. We also tried to defend it at the Hartwell's appeal, which was providing student accommodation on 1 and 2 bed flats, saying that wasn't a suitable mix, but the inspector said, no, that isn't a suitable mix. So the policy isn't prescriptive in what you should provide in a development, so it is kind of open to interpretation, but I think it would be difficult to say this wasn't providing an acceptable housing mix within the development itself.
Oh, sorry, can I just follow on from that, Chair?
Go on.
So the housing mix, sorry, is that only for the actual site that's being developed, or is it for the area surrounding the site?
For the house, it's for the development itself. So for what's been provided on site, that should provide an kind of an acceptable mix.
So
in that.
There's no weight that we can give to the impact that the mix that's being put on the site will have on the housing mix in the surrounding area.
No, if I can read the policy. Just seeing if I can find the actual policy. Yeah, it says new housing development should contribute to the providing choice in tenure and housing type, having regards to the mix of dwellings in the locality. So I think what we need to look at, is it providing additional, what's it providing in the locality? So I think because it's providing this mixture of uses within the site, I think, you know, it would be hard to conclude in my view that that wasn't contributing to the housing mix in the locality. And I said that has been tested at recent appeals where it was refused for this exact reason.
Yes, it has, that's right. But I'm just thinking the two examples that you gave, I think what did we say, the concentration here for HMOs is 41% or something. I don't think either of those two locations have got such a high concentration of students already.
I think no, I think you're correct. I don't think they do. I think this is much higher. But the inspector's quite clear what he was looking at was, what's this development providing? Is that a suitable mixture of uses within that site itself? So 1 and 2 beds were providing additional offerings to the locality. And I think this is what, you know, it would be looked at in a similar way, although there are HMOs in this locality, there isn't actually any PBSA. So, you know, that is contributing to the locality as well. So I think it'd be really hard to argue that this isn't providing an acceptable housing mix. And really the housing mix really is also looking at the 1 and 2 bed units rather than actual space student accommodation as well. So
yeah, sorry, can I go on, Chair? So surely the question of housing mix, part of that is the way that it impacts on the people that live there, and you know, whether, I don't know, things like the fact that this student block, the same as the HMOs in all probability, is empty for a good part of the year, and what effect that has on the families that live around there and you know, people in the surrounding streets. So
yeah, I think the idea of the policy really is to ensure, you know, in developments that you don't get developments coming forward that are only providing purely 5-bed houses because they're the most marketable. It is to ensure that you've got some low income housing. The policy specifically asks developments to provide housing for those on a low income, and this is providing affordable housing in also much smaller units. So in my view, that's actually contributing positively because you are providing smaller units that are more accessible for those trying to get onto the housing kind of ladder. So I think that's the real idea of the policy, is just to make sure, yeah, the market isn't saturated with one type of housing, and because this is providing more, I think that's acceptable.
Okay.
What's happened to Councillor McPhee?
So it seems that we cannot do anything with the PBSA numbers. That's all locked into something that we hope will change soon. However, I do find myself in sympathy with Councillor Hodge and Councillor Hughes in terms of that central courtyard and the massing. And if we're going to make any proposition against it, it's not going to be on the student numbers, it will be on that massing and overdevelopment.
Councillor Hodge.
Sorry, I'll be brief as I know other people haven't spoken. I just think we shouldn't lose sight of, we do have other policy. We have D2 local character distinctiveness, D5 building design, D6 residential amenities, CP7 green infrastructure. I know these are our workaday, everyday policies, but they are policies nevertheless, and they're important. And I know in our training Councillor Hounsell's mentioned this before. In our training we talked about building design. Does a design bring joy? It should bring joy. We have considered design proposals just based on design. We've considered student blocks on the Upper Bristol Road based on in a much more open space based on design and overdevelopment. So, and also I think when we think about the development of the site, the compromise of trying to get lorries turning, trying to get enough parking space, trying to get the student block, trying to get the affordable accommodation on that one corner in quite a densely populated area has led to all these compromises and a compromise on green infrastructure as well. So all those things have to be taken together, I think. Anyway, I'll let other people make their points.
Councillor Jackson.
I would agree with all the previous speakers. This is an extremely difficult one. I'm thinking about the student accommodation on the Wells Road in a block that was built on a derelict garage opposite St Martin's Garden Primary School, and that works very well. It actually, of course, it's near the shops. It is in a residential area around it, but it's only 3-storey. And I feel that this student block that we're looking at is going to dominate a very attractive Victorian neighbourhood far too much. It's simply, I think, if I was thinking about reasons for refusing this application, it would be on grounds of the massing, the overdevelopment of the site and the poor quality of the design of the student block. I mean, councillors have very rightly talked about our policies and where they are in this sort of pathway to being updated, but it's people that matter at the end of the day. There are simply going to be, in my view, too many people on this site, too much danger to the surrounding pedestrians and traffic, and too much loss of amenity for the speakers that we heard who are going to have the whole thing looking into their back garden. I'm not, I just don't feel it's acceptable as this at the moment. And I do think the Hartwell's garage decision is a relevant one, and we should be bearing that one in mind. But I just wondered with the Bath City Football Club development, which we rejected, which was also a sort of hybrid development like this. If you read the cooperative store in place of the football club, it's not much different. And that would have had a very significant impact on the Twerton High Street area. So do we yet have an appeal decision on the football club is my question. And if not, I think we've really got sufficient grounds for refusing this application.
Councillor Davis.
I was going to say, I don't think they actually appealed the Bath City Football Club application. I don't know if Sarah knows any different, but I'm pretty sure they didn't appeal it.
And that was 7 stories as well, wasn't it? Councillor Davis?
Well, I'm prepared. I see Councillor Ruby said she'd make a proposal as well, but I was thinking if we don't have a proposal on the table, I think we're going to go around in circles. So I know that development has progressed, and Tess has explained that quite clearly, and taking the positives that were identified by Councillor Sean Stevenson McGall, who I know has been involved in various pre-app things as well, linked to this with his residents and more recently Councillor Pear. I think because of the constraints of the policies regarding the particularly the student accommodation as they stand, and the other things that we're concerned about as they stand now, I feel we're constrained by those policies. So I'm prepared to make a proposal that we accept the application as is written, because we have to go with the policies we've got in front of us at this minute in time, not the policies we're aiming to get. I just feel at this minute in time, I'm prepared to make the proposal. We go with the proposal we have in front of us, linked to the policies that we have to adhere to.
To accept the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, as printed on our papers.
Okay, and the seconder? Does anyone want to second that? Can't. Oh, Councillor Clark, you want to second? Okay, so we've got a proposal on the table to accept the officer's recommendation. I'll carry on with the debate. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yeah, Tess, you mentioned that earlier on. You said, does it complement the surrounding area? Clearly, this doesn't in any way complement the surrounding area in its design, its structure, its density. It doesn't. It adds nothing to the area. With regard to mix, surely the mix should be a mix that we need as a council. And the mixture of 92 student apartments as opposed to 16 residential is not a mix we need. We've got a huge amount of student accommodation currently in the pipeline or existing. We have a shortage of residential, particularly affordable housing. So surely we can argue that the mix doesn't suit what Bath and North East Somerset need. But ultimately, I just think that whatever we do, we have an obligation to the residents to provide something that enhances their area. And this just doesn't do it. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby, you wanted to make a proposal, but now you'd like to speak. I'll take you now.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I will make an alternate proposal where the motion that's currently on the table to fail, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah.
I have listened incredibly carefully to this debate, and it is finely balanced in my head, but I am leaning towards saying, in fact, on this occasion, I would want to overturn the officer's recommendation, so I'll be voting against the motion that's currently on the table. And I think we said it in the debate, the reasons I would give would not be around the PBSA student mix, much as I would love to be able to do that. The reasons will be absolutely the equally solid reasons for me. It's not that I'm just grabbing around to try to find another reason to do it. We have policies that are very, very clear about keeping in context of the neighbourhood, and this is a predominantly Victorian small street neighbourhood, in terms of overdevelopment of a site, in terms of massing. This does break the height barrier for our that we've got a policy on, overlooking. All of these things, I think, weigh in my head to tip the balance the opposite way from the motion that's currently on the table.
Thank you. Yes, I would certainly support the notion of height, massing and overlooking. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, Amanda, Councillor Rigby said everything I would have liked to have said. So. Okay,
Councillor Craig.
Same here.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. The proposal is proposition to accept the officer's recommendation as written. So I will move to a vote on that motion. Let me just get the right order. I'll go in alphabetical order. So motion to support the officer's recommendation to permit. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Craig.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hodge.
Against.
Councillor Hounsell.
For.
Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
Against.
Councillor McPhee.
Against.
Councillor McCabe. I'm going to abstain. Councillor Rigby.
Against.
That, I believe, is Marie. Is that 7 rejecting the motion?
I've got, yeah, so there's 3 in favour, 6 against and 1 abstention, so that's lost.
Okay, so that motion falls. So go back to Amanda. You were willing to make another proposal.
Yes, Chair. I propose that on this occasion we overturn the officer's recommendation, and the planning reasons for so doing are around scale, mass and over development of the site. Also, lack of loss of residential amenity, and the fact that the design does not complement or enhance the local Victorian vernacular.
And a seconder, oh, Councillor Jackson.
As this unfortunately will be the last occasion I'll have the privilege of doing it for the foreseeable future, I'm very happy to second Councillor Rigby's recommendations.
Okay. Can I? Okay, yeah, we'll move on. If there's no more comments, we'll move on to that vote. As the officers happy that they know the list of reasons: scale, mass, overdevelopment, design.
Can I just
check?
Sorry,
yeah.
can I just check that you're just referencing the courtyard block in that design issue rather than the extension to the Scala?
I think so.
Just
yes.
the courtyard block. Okay, thank you.
Well, also the student block. Or is
That's
that
what we're talking about.
That's the courtyard block. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got disconnected.
Yeah.
The actual Scala thing, I have no problem with. It's unfortunate, this one.
So the other two buildings on site we're comfortable with, but the student block, the courtyard block, scale, mass, overdevelopment, design, does that include overlooking? All those things?
Loss of amenity.
Amenity, yeah, that's it.
Is the important thing. Because I gather from the officers, we're not allowed to put highway safety in.
Yes, that's true. So if I go in reverse order this time, so the motion is to reject the application on the grounds stated, and Councillor Rigby.
For.
Councillor McCabe. For. Councillor McPhee.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Councillor Hounsell.
Abstain.
Councillor Hodge.
For.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Okay, so Marie, that's carried. What were the numbers?
Yeah, that's 7 in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention, Chair, so that's carried.
That's carried. So the application is rejected on the grounds stated, entirely referring to the courtyard block, the student block, but accepting the proposition that student block is entitled to be there. Okay, would anyone like a little comfort break before we move on to the next item? Yes, Councillor Jackson. So 2-minute comfort break, then everyone see you back in a couple of minutes. Okay, how are we all doing? Looks like we're all back. Just about. A couple more. Okay, just waiting for Lucy. Are you back yet, Lucy? Are you there, Councillor Hodge? Hope she's inadvertently gone to have lunch. Okay, moving on to the next item is 21 Victoria Buildings. Councillor Craig, you have an interest in this item, and so you'll be switching off your video and switching off your sound, just in case you make enthusiastic gestures. Can I ask the case officer then, Emily Smithers, to present her report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen with you. The applications relate to 21 Victoria Buildings in Westmoreland. The property is Grade 2 listed and located within the World Heritage Site. The proposal is the reinstatement of railings to the front boundary and railings to the dividing boundaries of the front garden. This is the location plan. You can see the subject site outlined in red, located off the Lower Bristol Road. This is the existing garden plan and the roadside elevation. Here you can see the timber picket fence and gate. This is the proposed garden plans and elevations. These are the railings to go on the east and west subdividing garden boundaries, and the railings to go on the front boundary. And these are the detailed drawings of the front boundary treatment. The railings will be drawn down into the remnants of the previous railings here. And that's the nub of the previous railings in the detailed drawing. And this is a detailed drawing for the separating boundary treatments to the east and west. These are some photographs of the wider terrace just to show the variety of boundary treatments. The proposed railings for the front boundary treatments are based on the railings found here on number 15 Victoria Buildings. And these are the existing photograph. Sorry, bit of a delay there. These are the existing photographs to show the timber picket fence and gate, and you can see the remnants of the previous railings to the front boundary here. The recommendation is to permit the planning application and consent for the listed building application for the reasons as set out in the officer report.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. We have no public speakers. So does anyone have any questions for the officer? Okay. The question was raised about the mixture of sources of design, but you were comfortable, you were happy with what's been chosen, Emily?
Yes, I am. I'm happy with the design. I think it reflects the character of the building and the wider terrace.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions. Move to the debate. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. For me, I think this is quite a straightforward one. I'd like to move that we accept the officer's recommendation. I'm happy to move it twice, both the planning and the listed building application. But if that's being a bit greedy, I'm happy for someone else to do one of the two of them.
That's fine. So we have some seconders. Councillor Jackson. Anyone desperately want to second the listed buildings one? Oh, Councillor McPhee. There we go. You got your hand up first. Okay, so we'll move to the vote. First of all, the planning motion to accept the officer's recommendation. Go alphabetically. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Craig has an interest and will not vote. Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hodge.
For.
Councillor Hounsell.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor McPhee.
For.
Councillor McCabe. For. Councillor Rigby.
For.
And the list of buildings consent, I'll go the reverse order. Councillor Rigby.
For.
Councillor McCabe. For. Councillor McPhee.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Councillor Hounsell.
For.
Councillor Hodge.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
And Councillor Clark.
For.
So both of those are carried. Thank you very much. Unanimous. And that's all our items covered. Policy development is next on the agenda. There are no policy development items. Number 8, quarterly performance report. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the performance report? Otherwise, we are asked to note it. Appeals report. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the appeals report? No. In that case, the committee is asked to note the report. So we move on to the date of the next meeting, but just before we do, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody. This has been my last committee meeting as chair. I'm heading on to pastures new, as is Councillor Rigby. I'd like to thank all of you for all the hard work you do in preparing for these meetings and for turning up and being well informed when you get here. I'd also like to thank the officers who come and support us and aid our deliberations, reading out bits of policy that we then debate around. So I'd like to thank everyone who has been very supportive of the committee over these last 2 years, and I look forward to seeing Councillor Craig. Oh, can we invite Councillor Craig? Is she back? Is she gone? I can't see. Oh, there you are, yes. And I'd like to look forward to seeing Councillor Craig taking over as the chair of the planning committee. The next meeting will take place on Wednesday, the 2nd of June, 2021. Not quite sure, but likely to be a live in the flesh meeting. More will be announced by that. So if there's any site visits between now and then, that'll take place on Monday, the 24th. And I formally close the meeting at 12:47. Thank you all very much. Oh, Councillor Rigby, would you like to? Sorry, I don't quite close the meeting. Councillor Rigby.
I'd just like to say thank you to you, Matt. It's not always the easiest committee to chair, but you've done it with skill and good humour. And I too will miss it very much indeed. But I have every confidence that this committee will carry on doing great and wonderful things. But I think it'd be wrong not to thank you as well, Matt.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to add my thanks to Councillor Sally Davis, who eased me into the role to start with and has provided a lot of support and I think a consistency of decision making over the last few years. So thank you very much, Sally. And I look forward to seeing you all on YouTube. I am actually on the reserve list, I believe. So you might not quite have gotten rid of me. Anyway, thank you all very much.